with that jury reaching a verdict in the Port shooting trial. They found Theodore Wafer guilty on all counts in connection to the killing of Renisha McBride.
And that includes second-degree murder, manslaughter, and felony firearm charges. The shooting happening on Wafer's front porch in Dearborn Heights last November.
We have complete Team 7 coverage of the verdict and reaction for you. We'll begin with 7 Action News reporter Kimberly Craig, who was in the courtroom when that verdict was read. Kim?
And security was tight inside the courtroom and outside the courthouse. And right now, Theodore Wafer is behind bars, and Renisha McBride's family says that's exactly where he belongs.
Justice needs to be served. You did cold-blood murder. That was murder.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Theodore Wafer, as follows. Count 1, murder in the second degree. Guilty of murder in the second degree.
The 55-year-old Dearborn Heights man did not show any emotion as the jury read their guilty verdicts.
Count 2, manslaughter. Guilty of statutory manslaughter.
Thank you. Thank you. Because the facts prove exactly what happened.
The jury found Theodore Wafer guilty on all counts, guilty of murdering 19-year-old Renisha McBride, who knocked on his doors early one morning in November. Wafer tried to claim self-defense, saying McBride was trying to break into his house. Prosecutors say Wafer was simply mad that his van had been paintballed and he didn't call 911 because he wanted to handle the situation himself.
He said it.
Yeah, he
said it. He said he came to the door mad. He had loaded his gun weeks before. He was going to shoot the kids that paintballed his car, you know, so he had got loaded for them. So he was just waiting on something to happen. And unfortunately, my daughter came to his door and he shot her.
He should have called 911. He should have called 911.
One reporter asked the parents of Renisha McBride if they thought race played a role in their daughter's killing. They said no.
That could have been anybody's kid. That could have been anybody's kid. You know, I think he was ready for whoever came to his door. He's where he's supposed to be.
And Theodore Wafer will be sentenced on August 25th. Now, second-degree murder carries a penalty of any term of years up to life, and felony firearm alone carries a mandatory 2-year sentence. Now, Wafer right now is under arrest. He's in the custody of the Wayne County Sheriff. And coming up at 6 o'clock, you'll hear why Wafer's defense attorney says she doesn't want him at the Wayne County Jail. She says it has to do with his safety. We'll have that part of the story coming up for you at 6 o'clock. We'll see you then.
All right, Kim, you know, sometimes jurors come out and talk about their decision afterwards. They chose not to today?
That's correct. They chose not to. And we do want to also tell folks that there was really a total of 7.5 hours of deliberation. A lot of people expected it to be a little bit longer than that, but the prosecutors, and they really did lay out a very meticulous case. And I know a lot of people out there will be second-guessing these jurors, but you really have to be in that jury room, and you have to have listened with the intent that that jury did. And no one can really put themselves in their shoes, and only they know what they had to go through.
Yeah, well put, Kim. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our Team 7 coverage continues with 7 Action News reporter Kim Russell. She joins us live in Dearborn Heights where that shooting occurred. Kim, what is the reaction in that neighborhood tonight?
I am live on the porch where the crime, now known infamously as the Port shooting, happened at Wafer's house. I spoke to a neighbor who said that he can't believe Ted Wafer has been found guilty, that he has been convicted of second-degree murder, that he believes what happened on this porch is by no means intentional. It was not something that Ted Wafer happened. As we covered this trial in the courtroom, there were always a lot of the same people there. There was attorneys, there were reporters, there were relatives of Renisha McBride, and there was also a woman who just came there because it's a hobby. She enjoys watching trials. Her name is Dorothy Walker, and she tells me that she also came to believe that Ted Wafer was not guilty. She believes that after learning about what Renisha McBride did the night that she was killed, that she drank, did drugs, got in a car accident, and refused help at the car accident before walking miles to Ted Wafer's house, she became convinced that Renisha McBride was so out of control the night she died, Ted Wafer should not be held responsible for what happened.
I feel bad for him because I feel like she took trouble to his door. Why would she go to his house for help? They had called the police, ambulance, everything for it. The lady offered her her phone. She wouldn't use it.
Which one of you, by show of hands, is the poor person? Okay. All right, juror, I just want to let you know that your image will not be recorded, but there will be an audio recording. I understand that you've reached a verdict?
Yes.
Okay, could you please come as close to that microphone as possible and read your verdict, ma'am? Yeah,
Is this good?
that's perfect.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Theodore Wafer, as follows. Count 1, murder in the second degree. Guilty of murder in the second degree. Count 2, manslaughter. Guilty of statutory manslaughter. Count 3, felony firearm. Guilty of felony firearm.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Can you hand that to the deputy? You can have a seat. Ms. Carpenter, would you like to have the jury polled?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Juror number 1 was.
Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Some time ago, I did videos on this channel about the Renisha McBride case. And all week, I've been blogging about it on my blog, New Possibilities. In the description to this video, I will provide a link to my blog. But here's the situation for those of you who aren't familiar with this case. A young African-American woman was involved in a car accident in the Detroit metropolitan area. She got out of her vehicle, she walked some distance, and she eventually ended up at Theodore Wafer's home. She knocked on his door, seeking help, seeking assistance. Instead of getting assistance, she got a bullet in the head. She was shot in the head by this man. And as I said before, it seems to be a situation where someone is punished for seeking help while black. This woman was not committing a crime at the time. She was merely seeking help. And instead of getting help, she got killed. And this case is analogous to a series of cases. It's analogous to the Trayvon Martin case and the Jordan Davis case. And, many were fearful that this woman would not receive justice, that her family would not receive justice. And they were fearful because of what happened in the Trayvon Martin case and the Jordan Davis case. In both of those cases, the killer was not held accountable or punished for killing young African-American people. Those two cases basically are modern day examples of what happened back in the 50s in the case of Emmett Till. The lynching of Emmett Till. These are modern day examples of lynchings, basically, where black people were killed and no justice is served. So many people were afraid that that would happen in this case. But there are a couple of things that are different in this case. Before I go into that, I want to go into another issue about this case. A lot of people made a big deal about the fact that Renisha McBride was intoxicated at the time of the accident. They made a deal about her using marijuana the night of the accident. And it's important to realize that the only issue is whether or not this man had a reasonable fear for his safety. The only issue was whether or not he was justified in using deadly force. The fact of the matter is, drinking alcohol is not a capital offense. Smoking marijuana is not a capital offense. But many people think that because this woman smoked marijuana or because she was intoxicated, that justifies this man's actions. And I'm so glad that the jury was able to see through that smokescreen and was able to render justice in this case. This is a sign of hope, for the criminal justice system. And there are a couple of things that need to be pointed out about this case. And the first thing is the importance of the jury, the importance of having a diverse jury pool and a diverse jury panel. On this panel, there were at least 4 African Americans, if I recall correctly, and the jury was evenly split between men and women. Such a composition of a jury makes it possible for the jury to have diverse opinions. It makes it possible for the jury to see issues from different perspectives. And it makes it more likely for a jury to render justice in cases that involve African Americans. Because if you have people on the jury that are familiar with the plight of African Americans, that understand the situation, they are more likely to render justice than if you have a group of jurors that have no connection or no kind of understanding of the victim's plight. And that's basically what you had in the Trayvon Martin case. You had a basically all-white jury. Most of the jury could not relate to Trayvon Martin. They didn't see him as a full human being. They basically bought into a lot of stereotypes about African Americans. And if you've heard some of the interviews from some of the jurors, you know, that's obvious. One juror in particular, I forget her juror number, but her statements made it clear that the jury did not identify with Trayvon Martin. And, you know, that's a prime example of why juries are very important. The composition of juries, you know, is something that's very important. And, you know, that brings me to a point about us, each one of us as individuals, and what we have to do. That brings me to the point about our civic responsibilities and duties. You know, this is a prime example why it's important for every one of us to vote. That's how people get selected for juries. They get selected based on registering to vote and by voting in elections. Now, many people, when they have an opportunity to sit on juries, they try to weasel out of the opportunity. They try to get out of jury duty. But each one of us has a responsibility to serve on juries, to serve justice. And, you know, I encourage each and every one of you, if you're not registered to vote, you should vote. You should register and you should vote. You know, so that you can participate in these juries, so that you can help render justice in cases like this. That's one of the reasons why it's important to vote. Also, it's important to vote because you help select, in many jurisdictions, you help select who is the district attorney. You vote a lot of these positions in. And I'm not sure if that's the situation in Detroit, but I noted in a lot of jurisdictions, like here in Baltimore, people elect the district attorney. The head state's attorney is elected by the people. And that means that you can determine what kind of prosecutors you have in your court systems. That's another example of why voting is important. The next point that I want to talk about is race. People are so eager to pretend like race is not a factor. They always want to ignore race as a factor because talking about race really makes people uncomfortable. It makes people put up their guard. It makes people tune out. And, you know, that happens a lot. You know, people will automatically assume that someone is playing a race card, or you know, they will no longer be engaged in a discussion if race comes up. And, you know, I can understand why this family would not raise the issue of race. I mean, their primary concern is justice for their daughter. And I understand that. And, you know, I empathize with that. And I understand where they're coming from. But for us on the outside, we don't have the same necessary obligation. Sometimes you have to speak the truth, even if it makes people uncomfortable. The fact of the matter is, that man would not have shot Renisha McBride if she was white. If that was a white girl knocking on his door, doesn't even matter what time this girl would be knocking on the door. He would not have shot her. He wouldn't have shot a young white boy knocking on the door at night. This man saw a black face and probably assumed that she was some kind of criminal, that she was up to no good. So it's important to talk about race, and hopefully, this will generate discussion about race around this country, a much needed discussion about race. But, today is a good day. It's a day of justice. This man was found guilty on all counts, and I hope that he receives a harsh sentence. I mean, you had this young black woman, I think she was 18 or 19 years old, at the prime of her life, and her life was snuffed out and extinguished by this killer. And it's time that he face a real sentence and punishment. Peace. So before I finish up, I just wanted to talk about some of the reasons why I believe that this man was guilty. First of all, his story does not add up. He claims that Renisha McBride banged on his door very loudly, banged on his front door and his side door, and he says that he feared for his safety. And he claims that he was unable to locate his phone, so he reached for his gun. The story doesn't add up, and I'm glad that the jury reached the same conclusion. First of all, if somebody's trying to rob your house, they're not going to knock on your door. They're not going to bang on your door very loudly and draw the attention of the neighbors and to draw your attention. Most of the time, robbers are trying to be discreet. They're trying not to be noticed when they commit their crimes. So his story about fearing that someone is going to break into his house doesn't make sense. And also, it was pointed out that at no time did this man say, "Who is it?" He claims that he wasn't able to look through the peephole, but he never looked through the windows to see who was knocking at his door. His story doesn't add up. I don't believe that this man was unable to find his phone. Instead of reaching for his gun, he should have reached for his phone and called the police if he was fearful. The other thing that undermines his story is his claim that he was so afraid, but yet he's going to open the door to see who's knocking. If I fear that somebody's going to break into my house, the last thing I would do is open the door. His story doesn't make sense. And then he talked about how at first he told the police that it was an accident. And then once the case got to trial, he tried to change the story and say that he was acting in self-defense. So there's a lot of inconsistencies, and I'm glad that the jury saw through the nonsense. As the prosecution pointed out, this was a man who wanted a confrontation. He wanted a confrontation, and he was angry at the time. And he acknowledged that during his police interview, that he was angry that someone was knocking at his door. He didn't say he was fearful, from what I understand during that police interview. He said that he was mad. So his story didn't add up, and I'm glad the jury saw through the nonsense and rendered justice in this case.